Hi, welcome to Drinkosaurus, where we take ancient cocktail recipes into the modern era. My name's Matt, I'm your host, and let's get drinking. On today's episode, we're going to be mixing with a new spirit, Cognac. But before we get into that, let's talk about Cognac, and it's quite a big rabbit hole to get into. Cognac is an example of a spirit whose name is derived from the area in which it is distilled. So other examples of this are mezcal is the more generic version of tequila. Sparkling wine is the more generic version of champagne, and brandy is the more general version of cognac. So before we talk about cognac, let's understand what brandy is and how cognac is based off of it. Brandy is one of the most broad spirit categories because, put generally, anything produced from the juices of fruits or the pomace of fruits, which is kind of like the peels and the leftover pieces after you juice them, could be considered brandy. So typically, brandies are made from grapes, and that's where you get your kind of like traditional sort of brandies, usually they're barrel aged. However, you can make them from a variety of fruits. So for example, this is a pear brandy, which is made from the juices and the peels of pears. Typically, brandy made from fruits other than grapes are known as eau de vie, and they can come in a lot of cool flavors. So you can get like peach brandy or apricot brandy, really cool stuff. There's even more variety depending on which part of the fruit you use. So typically brandy is made with a combination of the juices and the pomace, but if you just use the pomace itself from grapes, you get something known as grappa, which is an Italian brandy. If you use apples, for example, you get a calvados, which is a more apple-based brandy. You also have a lot of spirits who are brandy adjacent, so they're not quite considered brandy, but they're really close. So metaxa, for example, is a Greek spirit that is mostly brandy, except it has some muscat wines as well as some Mediterranean botanicals. Metaxa? Did I say metaxa? Mixtaca. As we can see, brandy can take a variety of forms and flavors. Cognac, on the other hand, is a bit more rigid. So what makes a cognac? At the very bottom of the cognac grading is the VS grading, which stands for very special. Wow. Or sometimes known as 3 stars. So very special cognacs, if they're a blend, the youngest cognac in there, the youngest piece, has to be at least 2 years of age. If we bump that up to 4 years, we get VSOP, which stands for very superior old pale, which our director said just sounded like made-up words, and it does, which is probably why they denote it VSOP. So this one's very similar as before, but the youngest cognac has to be aged at least 4 years. Up until April 2018, so some modern developments in the cognac world, anything that was 6 years or older had the classification of XO, which stands for extra old. However, XO has been upgraded a bit to be every 10 years. Sorry, the youngest would be 10 years. And the new classification for 6 years is known as Napoleon, or Napoleon if you don't want to be fancy. And then finally at the top tier, which I believe is 14 years or older, is XXO, which stands for extra, extra old. And typically the further you go up the scale, since the production time is a lot larger, it has a larger cost and it's usually a bit rarer to find. Because if you're making a product that takes 14 years to make, you're gonna wanna charge some money for it. Now that we've learned a little bit about cognac, let's build a drink based off of it. Let's clear the table and we'll talk about the ingredients that we're going to mix together with cognac today. My goal today is to use cognac to make a drink that's on the sweeter side, like a sweeter, cozy, wintry drink, without adding too much sugar. In a previous video, there was a comment asking, why not just add simple syrup to a drink? It's my preference that if I'm adding sugary content, that it's also adding a different flavor as well. Also, syrup is pretty thick, and when you mix it, you have to shake it to emulsify it, and it also makes the drink heavier, and I prefer my drinks to be a little bit lighter. Typically, when you make a cocktail, you want it to stoke the appetite and not fill you up. So it's my personal preference. Typically, simple syrup is best used when you don't want any more flavors and you just want to make something sweeter. The cognac that I'm going to use in today's cocktail is this Pierre Ferrand 3-star cognac. It's on the lower end of cognacs, and if you're mixing with something, you don't have to have anything extravagant in there because it's getting mixed with other ingredients. That being said, this is super, super, super tasty and great on its own as well. So this is going to set our base. So I mentioned I wanted to make it on the sweeter side, and what better flavor to do that with than apricot. This is an apricot liqueur. It's from Giffard. I highly recommend them because they have a lot of flavor and not a lot of sugar. And apricot and grapes, I feel like those two flavors work really well together, and apricot is a typical ingredient you'll find in brandies. So these two, I don't know, they just make sense in my head. I feel they're like thematically appropriate. Hello, on today's episode, we're gonna do Cognac, we're gonna do Pierre et Ferrand.
I hate it.
Our third ingredient will get us that fall, wintry, cozy flavor in the form of some maple liqueur from, you guessed it, Vermont, where all the maple is made. This, just like the apricot liqueur, will add sweet flavors to our drink without necessarily adding too much sugar. This is super tasty. It's worth getting. You can put it on your waffles. And finally, adding with like the sugary sweet theme, I have some Aztec chocolate bitters, which have a chocolatey flavor, but oh, do I have bitters on my nose? It smells like Christmas. I don't know. Smell. Like if you rent like an Airbnb in a cabin and it like smells not weird, but it smells. This is what it smells like. It smells like rustic cabin. I don't want to say it smells like old people, but it might. So let's talk about the ratios that we want here. I'm going to be using a modified Manhattan template, which is characterized by 2 parts of our spirit to 1 part of our like main modifier. In terms of the ounces, I'm going to use 1.5 ounces of our Cognac and 0.75 ounces of our apricot liqueur. I don't want the maple to take over because if I put too much of this in, it's going to be way too sweet. So I'm going to add just 1/2 ounce as like a little pizzazz in there, and then a couple dashes of our bitters. Since none of these ingredients are syrupy or citrus, we can mix it. Speaking of mixing, let's get our table ready and mix this drink. We're going to start with our Cognac, and we're going to use 1.5 ounces, and this is going to form the base. I looked at my measuring cup because there was one time when I made a drink and I was using the wrong measurements the entire time. Go find it, leave it in the comments. You don't have to do that. I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. Well, that was the police. They're coming to get me for fraud. Next, we're going to use our apricot liqueur, and we're going to put 3/4 ounce in there, and we're going to have it be like the secondaries, the best supporting liqueur. That's what that's going to be. Ooh, smells nice. Our maple liqueur is next. Like I said, we're only going to put 1/2 ounce of that. We want it to make an appearance, but you know, it's not going to have. It's not part of like the liqueur union because it doesn't have any like really speaking roles in this drink. Finally, we have our Aztec chocolate bitters. I'm gonna add 2 dashes. There was one time, be careful with these Fee Brothers bitters, the top part sometimes just comes loose. And one time I added a dash of bitters and the entire bottle went in my drink. So be careful. Now that we have all of our ingredients together, I'm going to get my mysterious ice that appeared from nowhere. Put it in quietly. Oh, it splashed. Oh. Every single time. And we're gonna get our mixing spoon and we're gonna give it a mix. We're gonna mix it for about 25 seconds. Wow, look at the above mixing. I don't even know if it's in frame. Wow. Good. Hello, excuse me. We're going to get our hawthorn strainer, give this a little pour. Oh man, for a second I thought it was too much and it was going to overfill the glass. And usually when I use stuff like whiskey, rye, bourbon, cognac, I like an orange as a garnish, where I use a lemon for clearer spirits. It just sort of works, you know? So we're gonna get a nice little rind of orange. We're gonna express those orange oils over and give it one of these. And I present to you sweater weather. because it's like nice and cozy. Let's give it a sip. So the first flavor that you taste is the cognac. Cognac has a very distinct flavor, and it really cuts through most of the drinks. However, it is completely complemented by the sweetness of the apricot and the warmth of the syrup. So the first initial taste is very typical of the cognac, but it settles into that mapley, woodsy, nice, cozy sort of flavor. And that's all underlaid by the spiciness of the Aztec chocolate bitters. So it's really like a good start to finish sort of drink. The orange oils on top of it almost give it it almost smells like potpourri a little bit, because usually potpourri has those citrus things. So I'm just picturing, like I said before, like a cozy cabin where like somebody was really putting thought into how their cabin smelled. They're like, our cabin needs to have a specific smell. And then that's how this drink was created. What am I even saying? It's definitely sweet tasting, but it's in no way a sweet drink. It's still spirit forward, it's still potent, but like the flavors themselves are sweet without the drink itself being sweet. So hopefully in this episode you learned a little bit more about cognac and brandy and can see the large variety that they can bring to your drinks. Hopefully in the future I'll be mixing more with these ingredients just because they're really interesting and they're really cool to spice up your booze cabinet. Drinkosaurus is a production of Little Giant Monsters. If you like the things we're working on and want to see other projects, check us out on different social media platforms. If you really like what we're doing and want to support us, please consider doing so on Patreon. If you have any ideas for future videos, questions, I don't know, just want to see me do some stuff, let me know in the comments below. That's all for today's episode. Stay cozy, stay quaint. I'm trying to think of cabin words. Stay remote, stay fragrant. Stay cozy inside, keep warm if you're in New England or other, I don't know, if you're in Florida, keep warm too, right? I don't know. And most importantly, drink responsibly. Good, it's good, it's good. Have a good life. Bye. Boo, boo, boo. Do, 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 do. You know what it tastes?